To look at the disks, we need to go to Disk Management. Now there are a few ways you can get there. You can go to Tools and you can open Computer Management. Now as that opens, you can also right click on Start and you'll see Disk Management is in the list and that'll open the actual tool itself. Or you can go to Computer Management and Disk Management is contained within Computer Management. So quite a few ways to easily get there. So I'm in Computer Management. And you'll see that Disk Management shows up under this storage category here. I'm just going to expand that. Right now, I have one hard drive. It is disk 0. Then I have the CD-ROM DVD drive. But if I look at disk 0, it says basic. So I know it's a basic disk. Basic is the default when you install the operating system. So every disk is basic initially. If I were to right-click this, there is an option to convert to dynamic. If you had multiple disks, they would all show up here, and you could convert one or more of those to be a dynamic disk. Converting the disk to dynamic does not change anything in the interface, and it does require the computer to reboot. I don't want to reboot, so I'm not actually going to convert mine. Now, that reboot is only true for the operating system disk, like disk 0. If you had a second hard drive in your machine, you could convert that to dynamic and you would not be required to reboot. So I'm actually going to cancel that. But if this was dynamic, the only change you would notice is instead of saying basic, it would just reference dynamic. Nothing else changes in the interface. If I actually right click on disk 0, notice there is an option for a new span volume, new stripe, new mirrored, new RAID 5. Now, that's grayed out actually for two reasons. One, I'm a basic disk, not a dynamic disk, and you have to have multiple disks to actually configure this. We know a span volume or stripe volume would take a minimum of 2 disks to actually configure that. But if you wanted span or stripe, you could define that here. If I wanted a mirrored volume, I could have defined that. And we have this RAID 5 volume. So in the operating system itself, it's that easy to configure, assuming you have the appropriate disks to actually do that. So very straightforward. If I want to monitor disk performance to see how the disk is actually being used, you can actually just go to Start, and I'm going to search Resource. And you'll see Resource Monitor is in the list. You can also go over here to Tools, and you'll see Resource Monitor is in the list of tools as well. But I'm just going to click on it here since we already searched for it. This is also in Windows 10. This looks the same on your Windows 10. If you search for Resource Monitor, you'll find it. What I can see here is information related to my disk, but it is incredibly detailed information. Right now, I can see every process with disk activity. I can see how many bytes per second are read and written to my disk, but it is a lot more involved than that. If I expand this disk activity, I can see every process, the path. So I can see this DLL file is reading 550 or so bytes per second. I can see that this is writing about 5,000 bytes a second. But you can see this for everything on the system. Pretty powerful overall. If I expand storage, it'll show me every drive. Now I only have a C drive here, which is my physical disk 0. But I can see the active time. I can see available space. I can see total space. I can also see the disk queue length. The disk queue length is just a measure of things waiting to be read or written from the disk. So your computer often performs faster than your disk can read or write. So actions that you are trying to take just stack up in the disk queue and they wait to be processed. So the higher this number, the slower your computer actually. We prefer it to be on all zeros. Now, there's not a lot on my servers in this disk monitor. So what I'm going to do is switch back to my Windows 10 machine for a moment. On my Windows 10 machine, I'm going to go to Start and I'm just going to type Resource. Now, it's going to really look the same. It's just a lot more information. So in Resource Monitor on the client, I'm going to go to Disk. And I encourage you to do this on your own machine as well. So I'm seeing every process with disk activity. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open a PowerPoint file. Let me find one somewhere on my system. So I have a PowerPoint file I just opened. It opened on my other screen. But I can see PowerPoint now shows up in the list. I can see, I'm going to just highlight that, how much is read and written per second when I open PowerPoint. Pretty powerful. I'm going to collapse this window here. So I can see how PowerPoint is consuming disk resources. If I look at disk activity, I can see every file that's actually in use by PowerPoint, every DLL file, any executable files, everything related to PowerPoint shows up here, down to this DLL, how much is read, written per second to these DLL files. Pretty fascinating. So you could take any application and see exactly how that application is performing in relation to your disk. Every file an application is reading or writing. Incredibly detailed. I can see here, this is looking at... Now, as activity ceases, this will just start to disappear. But this is in my user profile. This app data roaming. So I can see that was a temp file. Well, that automatically disappeared because once PowerPoint opened, it just briefly updated itself. Then it stopped generating disk activity. Now, if I switch back to my other monitor, and I'm just going to click save. But when I do that and I clicked save on a PowerPoint, even though I didn't save any, even though I had not made any changes, you'll see it generates a little bit of activity. Another example, I'm going to pull up Google Chrome. And as that comes up, you'll see Chrome shows up in the list. Has a few tabs open in it. But I can see read, write per second. And I can see it's looking at my user profile in this app data local, Google Chrome. So all those locations are being accessed by the Google Chrome. And that's a lot. Now, we look at this tool in more detail later in the course. We look at network connectivity. We look at network monitoring, memory, CPU. But related to the disk, extremely useful to see how your disk is performing. Now, my host machine is actually running several virtual machines. But I have a solid state drive in my host. So my disk queue length right now is all zeros. So that actually means my drive is fast enough that it's running the operating system on this computer, and it's running several virtual machines all at the same time. So really, like 3 operating systems I'm actually running, and my hard drive is so fast, it can run all 3 of those basically in real time without having much content stack up in this disk queue. So very useful. You can also see OneDrive is in this list. I'm going to deselect the others, the Chrome. But I have OneDrive on my system, so it automatically synchronizes files. I can see right now OneDrive is reading 464 bytes. It's done because it just disappeared off the list, but any changes, it would just synchronize back and forth. But those synchronizations will consume disk time, and it just gets referenced here.